Ivan Pavlov was a well-renowned psychologist born on September 26, 1849, in Ryazan, Russia. He is credited as the founder of modern psychology and is very well known for his conditioning experiment in the 1890s, in which he trained dogs to salivate at the ringing of a bell.
Pavlov was the oldest of 11 children. His father, Peter Dmitrovich Pavlov, was a Russian Orthodox priest. Pavlov suffered from a serious injury due to a fall as a child, which caused him to spend most of his time at home with his parents and family garden.
Pavlov continued his education at the University of Petersburg, where he studied physics, mathematics, and the natural sciences.
After graduating from St. Petersburg in 1875, he studied medicine at the Imperial Academy of Medical Surgery. Pavlov received his medical degree in 1879, earning a gold medal award for his research work.
Went on to study digestion in dogs for 2 years in Germany. In his study of digestive systems, he discovered that dogs naturally salivate when presented with food.
Ivan Pavlov conducted neurophysiological experiments with animals for years after receiving his doctorate at the Academy of Medical Surgery. He became fully convinced that human behavior could be understood and explained best in physiological terms rather than in mentalist terms.
Pavlov's most famous experiment, as many know, was his dog experiment. Pavlov presented the dogs with a piece of meat, causing them to salivate. Moments before feeding, a bell was rung. Pavlov continued this for several weeks. Every time the dogs were fed, a bell was rung. Eventually, the dogs associated the sound of the bell with food and began to salivate when hearing the bell, even if there was no food present. The experiment proved that the physical response, salivation, was directly related to the stimulus of the bell.
Before conditioning, the unconditioned stimulus, the food, produced an unconditioned response, salivation. However, during conditioning, the neutral stimulus, the bell, and the unconditioned stimulus, the food, become associated with each other. This is a learned association. After the experiment, the dogs would salivate at the sound of the bell alone, regardless of whether or not they were presented with food. This means that the bell is now a conditioned stimulus, which resulted in a conditioned response, salivation.
Pavlov's experiment was a new concept in the world of psychology and discovered by accident in the dog experiment. That is why classical conditioning is often referred to as Pavlovian conditioning.
The ideas of classical conditioning are heavily applied to behaviorist theory as well, and it is a large factor of human behavior. Pavlov even received a Nobel Peace Prize in 1904 for his discovery. Psychologist B.F. Skinner went on to develop theories on operant conditioning, heavily influenced by both Ivan Pavlov and John Watson.
Skinner conducted a separate experiment on rats, in which he placed rats in the Skinner box. The box contained a button that dispensed food for the rats. Over time, the rats learned to press the button whenever they wanted food. This developed his theory of operant conditioning, different from Pavlov's theory of classical conditioning. Operant conditioning pairs a behavior and a response, whereas classical conditioning pairs two stimuli.
Pavlov had a tremendous influence on modern behavioral theory and is universally known as the father of classical conditioning.